Yeah, how we doing today, everybody? Look, I'm gonna just dive right into this one, and the top line and title of this one, I'm letting you know that it's condescending and offsetting on purpose because I'm gonna elaborate and go into detail what I mean by it. This one's called God's set. What do I mean by set? So I'm gonna just make a declaration right here. Actually, no, before I do that, let me tell you why I'm making this video. I just ran across a video by a respectable gentleman who is a content creator on YouTube. And from what I gather, there was a parable drawn on, I guess it's the talk or Today's Show, one of those things, the one that Whoopi Goldberg's on. And they had someone up there that made a parallel between the religious right and the Taliban. Okay. Now, regardless of what his opinion was, I'm not trying to get into that. But my point is, when I heard religious right and then I heard Taliban, I started to think, okay, so that makes me think, what's the religious left? What's the religious middle? And then we start talking about Taliban. It's like, okay, so what other religious entities would we be able to call out by name? I mean, I just start thinking Catholicism, Buddhist, uh, Confucius. Um, then I start thinking of denominations. And it's like, okay, so if we talk about a religious left and a religious right, then we must be talking about what? Are we talking about Mormon, Lutheran, Methodist, Mennonite, Baptist, Orthodox, uh, Latter day Saint, Jehovah Witness, Lutheran. I don't know. Just all of this stuff. Like, it all starts sounding like some gang stuff to me. Like, everybody got their own little set, and it's like, what set you claim? Like, you know how they be doing the gang stuff out here, and it's like, well, what set you claim? And then you run across something that's got the same color, but then it's like, well, we under the same umbrella, but we different. And it's like, what? And then it made me start realizing, okay, not that I didn't already have this sentiment and adamant perspective on the issue anyway, but after seeing his video, it compelled me to speak on it and say, all of that seems like it's outside of what the application was supposed to be. And here's what I mean by that. Me personally, I'll just come out and say it, not to be confrontational, antagonistic, or anything like that, but I don't claim any of that stuff. I will say that I am a Christian and I am a follower of Christ and leave it at that. Let me repeat that. I will say I am a Christian and then I will say I am a follower of Christ. I am a, that's it. I'm a believer in the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And I aspire and subscribe to the teachings of Jesus and the way that he set out for us to be. And I will willingly admit that I probably fail in some way or another every day. And I'll probably fail tomorrow in some way. And surely I failed in some way yesterday. But I try to get better second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. As I think any humble person out here would say about themselves. But as far as all of these names, and I call them sets, condescendingly, to say, you know, this may be me going out on a limb, and I guess this is to invoke discussion and conversation, as well as, you know, taking the lead on the issue that I feel needs to be talked about. But I think if you were to have asked Jesus, what denomination are you? People wouldn't have liked his answer. It would have sounded like, yet again, him being vague and speaking in riddles. I don't know what he would have said, but I'm almost sure he wouldn't have said any of those things that I rattled off in the beginning. I, I don't know. The only thing I can fathom is that his answer would have seemed like something vague, like to the point where, like, well, you didn't answer my question, because they're expecting you to name one of those denominations or religion titles that don't chalk up in the end, in my opinion. Gosh, I guess for the purpose of presentation, he would have said, I am of no denomination. I am of my father's house, or I am of my father's kingdom, or something like that. And people would have just been like, well, he didn't answer the question. And that's from the Pharisees and religious zealots, all the way to even people who, even Peter might have said something like that. Or just people that had the most admiration. Because my point is, in this world, I think we all get tied up in that claiming a set. So I'm gonna just kind of chuck a grenade at that whole thing. If you trying to say whatever you are trying to claim that you are, that exceeds what Jesus would claim he is, or what he would declare we all should claim ourselves to be, you in that grenade radius. I got a video about grenades, and a grenade would just get chucked at you, and everybody would get hit with the shrapnel. Everyone that's like trying to claim something, because I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing as followers of Christ. Those who declare and subscribe and submit to that. It all sounds like sets. I will speak on one part of the video that was interesting and intricate, and that's when he got to talking about, I think he took offense to the fact that he was even compared to Taliban. And see, this is my problem with the sets and all of that in general, because you'll get to a point where, like gang stuff, you got all these names, and then you got some that are affiliates of each other, and there won't be as much offense if you associate that little sector. But then if you affiliate them with something that's like completely on the opposite tangent of it, it's like, hey, hold up. You know, like you get a response. But they all gangs. Are we following, you know, what I'm communicating here? So I say that to say, you know, people, it would be like you got Catholic people and, you know, Christian people, and they claim all this stuff, and then it would be like if somebody came and said, I'm a Knights Templar, or I'm a I'm Jewish, and then it goes to I'm a Orthodox Jew, or what is that? So there's unorthodox Jew, and those people would kind of be like, oh, okay, well, you know, eh. But then somebody over here says I'm a like Muslim Shiite or Sunni or the, we're getting into sets now. And then it would be like, oh, well, so then it would be like, oh, you know, like Catholic, Christian, Jew, okay, all right. And then over here, you know, Muslim, and well, Sunni and Shiite. Well, even they over there fighting like they're sets. And then they have the other things around it, like I believe they call it like Wahhabi, or I'm Kurd, or you go over to some other region and I don't know, even within the Buddhist religion, then they probably have their own sets. I apologize that I'm not as familiar with that, where I can go and name all their denominations. But my point is, all of that is steering you away from Christ and God's kingdom, and claiming that and it being enough. And people don't like politics to be brought into religion. I don't even like the word religion, to be honest with you, because that is where it leads inevitably. And the concept of religion, and I'm talking about in its vaguest form, not, well, I mean, what, whose religion and what type. That is my point. I'm not going that far with it, because you can't leave it vague. It gets to a certain extent where once you start to segment and categorize and declare this or that, you bring the politics into play. Thus, you bring into play why people who were, if you will, of the same set that Jesus was, now you got beef with him. Like, where he didn't claim it right. He ain't repping it right. So that's why he wasn't trying to take it that far. That's why he didn't, they would try to jam him up all the time with, like, in essence, what set you claim, and why you repping like that if that's what you claim, and if you say you this, then why you acting like that? That was the example, I think, that he set, that we're not. Now, his endeavor and his campaign and his purpose was far, far, far greater than ours as mere mortals. But the common denominator is, just like then, the same is happening now. And that's politics, religion, and religious interpretation, and religious identity. All of this stuff just sows division. I'm gonna just call it all divination. That's the grenade. That's what I'm gonna call the grenade. I'm gonna call the grenade divination. Hit everything. Oh, but I'm a why I'm in the blast radius? Why I get hit with it? Like what? Divination, confusion. It says in the Bible, God don't do that. Jesus ain't do that. And at the most, when there was confusion and people were confused by what Jesus was saying, that's because they were trying to put a worldly interpretation on his spiritual communications. Because basically everything that came out of the man's mouth was spiritual, had a spiritual backing to it, had a spiritual overtone and undertone to it. So you get to the point of, if you were confused by anything that Jesus says, that's probably because you're trying to fit it in some box based on your worldly mind or your worldly perspectives or your worldly opinions. Like when he said, I'm going to just give you all an example of why you're not supposed to look that far into it. And I'm going to give you also an example of divination and confusion, and how people will end up confused, but they shouldn't even be confused. They're confusing themselves because they're trying to interpret it worldly. All right. When he made the claim, tear down this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. And people was like, worldly filter. And then they poured what was said in through their, like making some coffee, and they poured what he said in through their worldly filter, which we all tend to do. I do it myself. I'm not, but I'm just calling it for what it is. I'm in the grenade radius too. Please understand, like, ooh, ah, I get hit with some shrapnel. All of us will. But through the worldly filter, it's like, tear down the temple and build it back in 3 days? That's that riddle, parable way that Jesus spoke to people. And literally, he meant what he said. It's just that at that point in time, they were incapable of interpreting it. I think, all in all, hindsight being 2020, we could say we knew what he meant. He wasn't talking about the literal temple that they could only wrap their worldly minds around when he said temple. Like, oh, well, you must be talking about like this temple right here. But that ain't the temple he was talking about. So they were confused in that sense, but that wasn't him confusing them. That's them confusing themselves. And here's the other thing. I now realize why he communicated like that. Because how can you answer, or how can you even have political discourse, religious discourse? You can't. It's almost oxymoronic. So as to answer their questions, you would probably have to come with something like that. I think it's to the point where once he got around us and he started to see how everybody's claiming a set and repping a set and trying to rep a set a different way. And I hope, I'm not going to say I hope, but if there are some people that are hearing this and they're getting offended, like, well, you referencing my denomination and what I claim to a set? Yeah. In the context of what I'm talking about, yeah. Now, does that mean you gang bang and sell drugs and break the law and all of that? No, that is not the point. The point is you trying to specifically claim something and get specific with it. And that's what leads to the exact political tension that they came for him over. So it's like it's rhetoric and dialogue to just be avoided because it can't go anywhere. The last thing I'm gonna say before I end this, look, you can be a Catholic. I'm just gonna use those two as examples because I would say those are two of the more polarizing ones that you hear about. You can call yourself a Catholic. It's my place neither here nor there to judge. But my point is, you can call yourself a Catholic and then point your finger at what you got. A bunch of them now. You got the Taliban, you got ISIS, you got what, just all of that stuff. Gosh, what's the other one? See, I don't really. Nah, I can't even remember. But anyway, gosh, I want to remember that. Oh man, I'm trying to. I guess it's beautiful that I'm drawing a blank because it doesn't even really matter. Because the point that I'm trying to make is grenade. It get to a point where Taliban can come over here and point the finger at Catholic people and the lowlights of how they move. I mean, we know the way children are interacted with as far as the Catholic religion goes. That's the common universal criticism And mm, where do I begin talking about the Taliban? There's just all, but let's just go with like public execution and how they be doing that stuff on TV, beheading someone on TV, acts of violence on TV. Okay, all right, and then we can. No, I'm gonna just do it for the sake of it, because that this is the smoke that I'm getting at. And then we could take Christianity and throw it in there, and people will say, "Well, that was hundreds of years ago." Like, A, it's not still going on to this day. But then we could take the Crusades. Okay, which of those is right between what I was saying about interactions between authority figures and priests and nuns and all of that and children, as far as when you talk about Catholics, the media savvy displays of violence that we get from the Taliban over here, and the Crusades, which let me just give you all some food for thought. Crusades, that was the Knights Templar doing that. Knights Templar is Freemason nowadays. So that's for anybody that wants to come with where the Crusades and those of that mind state and that it was a long time ago. Okay, but was it? Anyway, so who's right and who's wrong with all of that we put up there? Because those are three sets that I can throw out there, and I don't think either of those examples I gave are of God, something that God would back. And then we get to my ultimate point. So then it's like, okay, so if they all wrong, so what are we doing now? Trying to say which one is more wrong than the other? Well, that one's kind of wrong up here, but the other one's just wrong down here. Okay, this is spoken about in the Bible. Hot, cold, lukewarm. Oh, well, I mean, we do some things wrong. I mean, but we're not as bad as them. Like that gets us nowhere. Well, okay, so they all sin, but like that's like a level 10 sin, and this is just we don't even be doing some level 1 and level 2 sins. Says God hates sin. It almost gets to a point where they be doing this, they be going to the extreme. They extremists. Don't be associating us with extremists. Sin. I hope people get where I'm going with this. That is not so. I wrap it up and say it doesn't matter what you claim to be. Me personally, I don't think I take it as far as a set. That's why I just uh, say I'm What what church you claim? I would just say the Church of Christ, follower of Christ. I don't even know if I want to take it as far as saying I'm a Christian, because then people be like, well, I'm Catholic and I'm Jewish. And it's like, okay, see, that's where the sect claiming thing comes into play. So now it's like you got, so you Jewish and I'm Christian, like, so we different, but it doesn't have to be taken that far, and it shouldn't be taken that far, because as soon as we start taking it that far, that's when we start hitting those holes of, well, don't be comparing me to them. I can tolerate being compared to these, or I welcome being compared to these, but not those. And regardless of which one you claim, which regardless of which you identify with or declare to and submit to, it ain't do Jesus no good in the long run. They came for him. And if they came for him and offended him, who's any of us to think that that ain't gonna happen to us? Now, last I left out a few atheists. I don't even have nothing to really say there except for God loves you too. And if at any point in time you want to work on that, you'd be welcome. I hope this got somewhere. Even if this just makes sense to one person, I'd be like, man, all right, cool. If it don't make sense to you, by all means, comment and let me know how you see it. But yeah, I don't think that as a follower of Christ and trying to live a life where the goal is to try and be as much like him as possible, though we will all fail because we'll never reach 100%. Moral of the story, I don't think he would have claimed any of these things that we tend to get defensive or go on the offense on behalf of. Let me know how you feel about that. That's exactly what the comment section is for, if you would like to let your opinion or perspective be heard. And whether you do that or not, I would appreciate you liking this video, whether you agree or not, just for the just for the audacity of someone speaking on this. And subscribing would be much appreciated too, because I speak on things like this a lot. Deuces.